welcome to the Family Law Cafe podcast. I'm excited today to have Dave Rindl with me. He is a coach. Awful lot of coaches around with doing coaching, this life coaching, finances coaching, all sorts of coaching, which I think is a great thing. Dave's been doing this for quite a while, so I'm going to be exploring with him what he does, what coaching's all about, and how it can improve your life. So let's dive in. So Dave, really nice to see you. We've met a few times. And how would you describe what you do?
How I coach, there are two answers to that. One is what I do and what the outcomes are for my clients.
Yeah.
And then there's how I coach.
Okay.
So the outcomes, I think most coaches aim to enable people to be more effective in whatever area matters to them. You've got coaches across all kinds of areas.
Yeah.
You've got passion coaches, you've got nutrition coaches, you've got all kinds of
They're fashion coaches.
I've
Obviously, I
heard
don't
of.
have
I've
one.
heard of them.
Because I don't need one.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But
yeah, that's
they're coaches in almost every area of life you can talk about.
Mhm.
But ultimately, they're about enabling people to be more effective.
Yeah.
And then there's how they do that.
Mhm.
And some coaches work more as a teacher or trainer. So you should do this, and so on. And I don't work that way. A lot of coaches, it's about enabling the client to discover for themselves. So I use different models. I use different ways to have people think newly about something so that they can discover and find out things. And just very briefly, I talk about that everywhere we want to be more effective, there's an entanglement. And that entanglement's of the internal and the external. So the external being our relationships, legislation, circumstances, projects, whatever you can think about there.
Mhm.
And then how we think about that, our thoughts, feelings, beliefs, memories, all of that, which
So our internal.
yeah,
So the external being situational, maybe.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And the thing that makes a difference, actually, where people find they're stuck most of the time, is there's something about how they relate to that external or how they relate to that internal. So as we go through that process, people start to see, oh, yeah, I think about it that way, or whatever.
Mm.
So in asking them questions, in pointing to things, people start to untangle those strands and find themselves taking actions or having conversations and producing results which weren't even on the radar for them.
Right, I've got loads of questions coming from that, loads of questions. But before I get to those questions about how the coaching works, and just as I understand it, you're saying, so the situational, relational, outside aspects, and then there's what's happening for us on the inside. And so, as I understand it, you're trying to get people to figure that out themselves to make change. Would that be a huge summary?
Yeah, there's a little bit of a paradox in it because I need to provide something.
Mm.
Otherwise, what's the point in a coach?
Mhm.
Yeah. I think when we were talking previously, you talked about sport, and it's a good analogy.
Yeah, that's how I know about coaching through
Absolutely. And most
sport.
people are used to
Mm.
football, cricket, athletics, whatever.
Yeah.
People have coaches.
Yeah,
It's the outside set of eyes that allow people to see things newly.
yeah,
But it's critical that people discovering it for themselves, because if I'm telling someone what to do, we're right back to a kind of parent-child relationship. And as children, we either did one of two things. We're either like, internally, go away, I'm not going to do that. Or being the good boy, good girl, oh yeah, that's what I need to do. And it doesn't provide anything new. It doesn't provide any power.
yeah.
So it's challenging being in that conversation, enabling people to discover, but I need to be providing something to do that.
Yeah. So definitely want to come back to that because yes, I do know a lot about coaching because I was sort of thrown into international sport quite a young age, about 16 onwards until I was 32. So I had lots of different coaches and definitely coaching evolved. When I started as a junior, we were told exactly what to do, and that had some benefit. We did really well with this. It was really old school, and then it developed into. But even then, I can see that I was in rowing, and so I was in a team, and I think that did make the difference. That in that crew, I had people in it who would almost every single stroke, analyze it. We'd finish a piece and they turn around and, you know, on the second stroke, this happened or that happened. It was incredible. We were doing that at age 16, 17. So I've got the knowledge of coaching and big fan of it. In fact, obviously would have achieved absolutely nothing had I not had coaching. So I know that you've been coaching for a long time. When did you start?
In various forms, consciously, about between 35 and 40 years ago.
35 and 40 years
Yeah,
ago.
way less grey hairs.
Young man. And before you coached, I mean, you look too young, but did you have any career before that?
I trained as a chef,
Mhm.
um, and I worked in that field for a while. Even after I got involved in, let's call it personal development work,
Yeah.
I worked in that field.
Was that your first spark that you yourself wanted to develop?
Yeah, I wasn't very good at school in terms of applying myself. So I struggled with my, as they were in those days, O and A levels, and went to college, but it was kind of like the back of my mind, well, of course, that's what I want to do. I kind of pushed myself to do that. And it never even occurred to me to do something else, but I did hotel catering management.
Mhm.
And then from there, I went to become a chef. So it was a lot of kind of semi-conscious stuff in the background driving it. I don't think I at any point sat down with the kind of question I asked people. Well, if I could do anything, what would I love? I mean, listen, I only gave up on being a professional footballer when I was sometime in my 40s. I had that dream and fantasy. I was never good enough.
My partner's still waiting for the call up from Spurs.
Absolutely.
He's not getting it yet.
Yeah. But it was like, so there was a lot of unconscious which drove me to that. And I love the whole cooking industry. I love that. Um, but it was as I started to uncover things for myself, and there was some spark which was like, wow, this is extraordinary. This is what I want to do. I want to make this available to others.
Mm. And did you so you're working as chef, but I think you did some other things too, didn't you? You worked in the city, no?
Yeah, so I got involved in, as I said, developmental work,
Mhm.
personal development work, but that was kind of alongside my professional life. And at some point, I was running my own catering business not very well, and I realized I'm not ready to run a business.
Mhm.
So I thought, what am I going to do? And I ended up going into sales first of all, and then I landed in the city,
Mhm.
working back office,
Mhm.
financial area.
Mhm.
And whilst I was there, I did a master's course, which I didn't finish. The dissertation came out with a postgrad diploma in personal and organizational development,
Mhm.
which opened my eyes to a whole lot of other methodologies.
Mhm.
Um, and that was kind of the journey. And then at some point, I got let go from a contract in the city, and my wife went, why don't you take a couple of years, see if you can make it? You've been talking about it. And the short answer is nearly 25 years later, I'm still seeing if I can make it.
Great. A journey of self-discovery for you yourself. Do you have a coach?
A number
Yeah.
in different formats. So not someone I specifically sit down every week and talk about my business like I would with certain people, but I'm in certain structures. There's a group of us who meet at 7 o'clock on a Friday morning, and that's certain challenging each other and so on. I've got a daily buddy, so really different structures.
Wow. And so if someone comes to you, well, firstly, what sort of person comes to you? Is there one type or is there, male, female, exec, painter? I don't know. Is there any particular person that you help or is it a mixture?
I've worked with running a program. I didn't put the program together, but I've worked with prisoners coming to the end of their term in prison.
Wow.
I've worked with CEOs.
Yeah.
I've worked with people I work with 10 NHS trusts. So all kinds of different people from there, one-to-one coaching, designed and ran some programs for some of them, some teams and so on. And I've worked with people in the financial industry.
Mm.
So real mixture of people. Part of my passion is really enabling people to, let's use the word champion, um, those things that really matter to them, whether that's in their family or whether that's globally,
Mm.
and enabling them to be more effective in that, making a difference, I suppose, for the betterment of our society, of beyond the world, the universe. And so somewhere in speaking with people, something, a light bulb comes on from someone, they go, I want to speak to Dave further. Now, as I said, I've worked with people from all kinds of backgrounds, and I had someone I worked with a few years ago came out of the blue launching a hedge fund. That wasn't on my radar. I wasn't the type of person, but extraordinary guy,
Yeah.
big passion for what he was doing.
Mm. So where do you start with people? So someone comes to you, is there any particular way you start? I mean, obviously you've done this for such a long time with so many different people, incredible amount of knowledge. Do you have a methodology of where you start, or do you start just by seeing where it goes and what they need?
To a certain extent, the second.
Hmm.
So I start with, what had you come to me? What had you be interested in using a coach? Or even if they're not interested, it's like, well, if you were going to use a coach, where in your life would you be interested in having something happen that doesn't look possible now, doesn't look likely? That question, my experience is we don't ask ourselves very often. So sometimes it's just that question's the first step for people, and they go, I never thought of that.
Yeah, I don't know that because I guess I was a kind of child at school when I was starting to sort of write, we're doing, being on training plans and, writing international regattas, and then, we're going here and there. And so I did it even before I was kind of fully matured. So I think I would probably be well, I had coaches. I think they're really useful when I, wanted to, make this business have some impact and actually work. I realized, I needed coaching, and that's really helped.
Mm.
So I totally commend it to people. Um, so I might be that person that I'm always looking for more, and it's a big weakness. I'm never saying, yeah, I did that. That was great. I'm not very good at that. I'm always looking at what to do next. I'd probably be a tough one.
But it's an interesting one you talk about there, because people get all kinds of different stuff from coaching.
Yeah.
And for some people, maybe their default is similar to mine, which is, as I said, I wasn't very good at school. I still need to almost take myself by the scruff of the neck to get myself to do certain things. And I've trained myself to do that. Whereas some people, and it sounds like you might be a case in point, right from early on were quite good at focusing and doing what there is to do. And, you know, you don't end up running a law company by accident, Joanna. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, school was, I think for me, it was a little bit kind of chaotic at home. So school was a great place for me. I could achieve, do stuff, tick. I didn't have any problems at school, and I shot, I'll be honest. I don't mean to say I'm not proud of that, but I'm very different to you, where you're very reflective. And I just probably don't have that ability to stop and reflect enough. I have to really work on that.
Something and it's interesting the words we use. Whenever someone says to me, I don't have that ability to, it's like there's room for a challenge there. And this, I'm just aware I'm about to, risk going into a coaching session. I'm not going to do that now. But but it's interesting whenever someone hears themselves saying, oh, that's not me, or I'm not capable of that. And it's fine to follow that path. But it's like, then there could be a question there. And so someone like you, I'd be working very different, because it may be for you, I don't have that sense of accomplishment, or I don't have, there's always that. And then we'd be looking at that, their relationship to that. And they might even sometimes identify where that came from. We make up stories as we're growing up.
Yeah.
Whereas someone else might be really clear, but it's like, what does it take to get beyond that barrier?
Mm.
It's really different.
So obviously, people that come to Family Law Cafe, I've got enough ability, having done this for so long, to really recognize, you know, where people sometimes are so capable, but are just really broken at that moment, really, really confused. Really, a lot of what we're doing is just trying to put that in order, knowing the legal process, because they have to get through this process. So they're in this, emotional confusion. Um, and that may not be that the natural way they've been, because obviously they've had a really tough time, that problems in the marriage, and so we are then going through a set procedure, and I'm trying to sort of get them through that. And I feel that coaching could be really useful for people in a way that sometimes therapy therapy is quite different because as I understand it, if people started to go into therapy whilst they were going through a legal process, I think that could be quite tough because they'd be bringing up things in the past and it could be very, very challenging for them. So I've often heard do that later. I mean, what's your thoughts? If someone's going through a divorce, whether coaching would be a good idea or should they wait or does it depend on the person?
I think what you said probably does depend on the person. I think the way I coach, sometimes people do see things from the past. So I don't pretend anything other than it's not necessarily a comfortable process.
Mm.
But then you just pointed to it takes a great skill to be able to have that conversation, and you've got a process you need to go through, a legal one.
Mm.
So how do you balance that conversation? How do you manage that? I mean, I'll give you,
Do you mind if
sure,
I just
please
intervene?
ask.
Just because it's just hit me. Do you also, if you don't mind me asking follow up on that, think it might be something where they just get through the divorce? That might be a good time to start coaching because they might feel, well, now I'm moving on to a different life and perhaps not want to get into the same old mistakes that I've had before.
It really depends.
Yeah.
You know, I know quite a few people who specialize in the area of coaching around the area of divorce. Some specialize in going through that process.
Yeah, well, there are, of
And
course, divorce
yeah,
coaches.
and yeah, and they, you know, the ones I know and the ones I'm taken to, they're like, you can come through this, and it's really where I stand. You can come through this and have the relationship be actually good, it be a positive process. And I know that's not everyone's experience. Divorce, absolutely. Um, and for some people, they might go, that's too much. I just want to get through this physical process. But sometimes just having acknowledged that makes a difference for people.
Yeah. And by you changing, you know, my understanding, and I try to put this into practice, if I change, other people change around me, obviously. I mean, have you had experience of, um, one person's change, seeing that affect others?
I mean, give you a couple of
Yeah.
examples. And of course, nothing's ever guaranteed. It's like it's a discovery. In one NHS trust, I was asked to come in to work with someone who didn't turn up for the meeting.
Mhm.
So I was talking to their boss. And in talking with their boss, one or two things were coming out. And I said, have you ever thought of having coaching so you can make a difference for this person?
Yeah.
And they said, well, I hadn't. I was thinking of having some coaching, and they took me on as a coach.
Hmm.
And then what I discovered, the person who didn't turn up for the meeting was a team leader, and they had taken out a grievance against my client. And they'd taken out grievances against their three previous managers.
Okay.
And my perception is the organisation had them over in a corner as a problem. Oh, how can we deal with that? Let's get a coach in to sort it out, which is not, for the most part, how coaching works.
Yeah.
But sometimes you get
So
asked to.
imposed on that person.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I started working with my clients, and they started seeing some things that they were not awake to. They were extraordinary. I thought if I worked for this organisation, I'd like them as my boss.
Hmm.
However, they started to see that when things got difficult, they would kind of cut off from people, whether it's someone reported to them, someone they reported to, or one of their peers. They would kind of almost kill them off.
Mm.
And they started to transform that for themselves. About halfway through me working with them, the team leader withdrew their grievance against my client and started asking my client for support in dealing with her own issues. And my client said to me when we finished, he said, when I started, I had a meeting with her the next week, I was dreading it.
Hmm.
She said, I've got a meeting with her next week now, I can't wait.
Yeah.
So it can happen. And then something happens while I was asked to come in somewhere else. And my assertion is, I still haven't got absolute proof of this. There was some group bullying going on, but I was asked to work with a woman who I think the whole team had taken a grievance out. There was something like that going on. And she wouldn't move. We had sessions and it wasn't going anywhere. And at some point I said, look, I said, tell me if I'm wrong here, but you're not about to move until the organisation moves towards you, are you? And she looked at me, she said, no. I said, okay. I said, this is not serving you, it's not serving the organization, it's actually not leaving you with any dignity in the matter. I'm going to draw a line under this. I will speak to your boss. I will clear it up with him. And if and when you want to speak to me again, you can let him know and we can start the conversation again. So I spoke to her boss and he was fine about it. He told me afterwards, after we did that, after we drew a line under it, her behavior changed. My assertion is she was heard for the first time.
Yeah.
She was stuck. And what happens is when we're not heard, when we don't experience being heard or safe, we'll keep pushing.
Yeah.
And then other people are reacting the same way. So, but I had to discover something over here which allowed her to change.
I'm guessing you're an incredible listener to people.
Some of the time.
No, you're so modest. I mean, I can tell that it seems to me that you've got so much knowledge and you've done this for such a while and you've thought about it that you really listen. And maybe it's not, maybe that's more than that. Because it's not just listening, is it? You get them.
Well,
Do you think that's right?
it's certainly my commitment. I'll tell you why I said some of the time.
Yeah.
I wasn't trying to be cute or flippant about something. Because I'm also awake to how bad I can be at listening at times.
Okay.
I have to catch myself. And there'll be times when I'll come out of a conversation, I'm like, oh my God, did I just do that? You know? Now, very often I'll go back to someone and say, look, did I just mess up in that conversation? But yeah, my commitment is to leave people with that experience of being heard, validated, and that doesn't mean necessarily agreed with. Because for someone to see something else, they need to be heard. They need to be in one of the methodologies I kind of work within. I don't use this particularly. They talk about someone being recreated. So you know that experience when you're maybe angry or upset or whatever, and someone's really there with you, and it's like really gets. I try to do that, and forever tripping over my own feet with it. But yeah.
There's a huge ego thing, isn't there, really, when I come to think about it, because, as someone that's competed, international competitions, it's kind of all about you, who gets the medal, the athlete. There's no medal for the coach, and yet they couldn't do anything without the coach. And I guess you have to be someone that doesn't have that level of ego. Is that right? I'm guessing.
Listen, I've got a big ego.
Or maybe you have to have a huge ego that you're cool about it. Yes.
One of the things I discovered, I told the truth about, was what a size ego I've got and how arrogant I am.
Mm-hmm.
But then I can take ownership of that.
Yeah.
So if that's running the show, I'm out of, game over.
Mm-hmm.
But when I can take ownership of it, then there's somewhere I can move with it. Then I can be with other people. And it's interesting you're talking about the coach doesn't get acknowledged. For a short while, I did a martial arts some years ago. And I was told about, I think it's in Thai boxing, I'm not sure if I've got this quite right. But you have the coach who's basically the pad holder, holds a pad and is working with the person. And the pad holder, I think, gets half of the winnings. So it was in that, I think I've got that right. It's in that one, they're fully acknowledged. The person who's out there knows that if it wasn't for my pad holder, I wouldn't be able to win. I quite like that.
Yeah, I don't know where we are in boxing and professional boxing. I'm sure that that's an element. So it's interesting, isn't it? What are there any times where you feel someone's really changed, like made a massive move when you've coached them, or is it sort of small little changes that makes them more like them? It's a bit like plastic surgery. They're more like themselves, but fresher.
You see, I'm not sure when I first had some, let's call it self-development. I participated in a course 40 years ago. And it wasn't a skies open, oh my God, for me. It is for some people.
Yeah.
I came out of that course a little bit like, what did I just do? I was like confronted by, what it might take for me to have my life work the way I wanted to. And there have been times where I've had insights, where I've had revelations, where oh, I've just seen something. I mean, in personal relationships, I was not very confident in relationships. And I had an insight at some point, which it was almost overnight. I started communicating very differently with women. I can still be an absolute jerk around that. But I started communicating, just ask my wife, but I started communicating very differently with women. And what happened, I mean, things changed overnight for me in that area, which was revelationary. So it can work both ways. And I see clients of mine, at times they'll see something and they'll come back to me and say, you know, that thing you said, thank you. Or someone will contact me a couple of years later and say, that conversation you had with me. I have to wrap my brains for the conversation, but for them, it made a big difference.
Yeah.
And for other people, it is almost a moment by moment thing. It's like going to the gym and building up muscle.
Yeah. Until you're such a changed person that I suppose it's like growing. You don't sort of, physically growing as a child, you don't notice it happening, but obviously one day you're there, you know, much taller than you were before, and so you're not necessarily going to see it. And I guess it comes from people maybe reacting to you differently, your life being different. You suddenly look around and see everything looks very different. Um, so in terms of coaching, if people watching this, listening to this, and they're a little bit wary because might be a bit like me thinking, oh no, I know everything, I'm fine, I don't want to know. I'm not sure I'm totally like that, but sometimes I just feel you kind of feel scared to ask people, like, I should know that, I should be able to deal with that, why can't I? What's your thoughts on how they could find out about whether it's right for them?
If there's, as with all these things, if there's something in the way stopping one, it's going to take taking a step beyond that. And I know that sounds obvious. Um, so how to do that, to sit down with someone and explore, have a conversation, an exploratory conversation. Where I come from with that is sit down, have a conversation with me. You may find out you want coaching. You may find out you don't want coaching with me, and that's fine.
Mm.
You may find, no, I'm totally fine on my own. I don't want coaching. Or someone I grew up with, I was talking to him about it at one point. I recommended a course to him and then didn't hear from him. When I went back to him, he said, thank you for that, but it's way too scary for me. And he wasn't willing to step beyond that.
Yeah, it is scary, I think. Uncomfortable to change yourself, isn't it?
And if anyone's like me when I first did this, you're not walking around going, oh, I'm scared of it.
Mm.
You're walking around kind of, I was this front, it's like, I'm not scared.
Mm.
And then it took something for me to go, actually, I am. And actually, it takes being a bit vulnerable.
Yeah, hard to be vulnerable.
I was just a short thing made me smile about that word. I was leading a presentation skills course with some people in a company, and I hadn't mentioned the word vulnerable all day. And this guy stood up at the end and he said, can I just check something? What you're talking about is me being vulnerable at the front of the room. It was one of those moments where I don't necessarily believe in some bigger power, but I kind of went, thank you. It really was one,
Yeah.
but it does take something, and I try to never lose sight of that.
If you wait there, I'm going to make you vulnerable because I'm going to introduce you to my next guest, and they're just going to ask you some questions. I know you haven't met them before. They are from London Money. They specialise in mortgages. So they're going to come introduce themselves and just ask you a few questions.
Sounds good.
I'm Martin Stewart, Director of London Money.
Okay, good to meet you.
And I'm Kathy Davison, London Money.
Good to meet you, Kathy. Good to meet you, Mark.
Nice to meet you, David. So you said you're a coach.
Yeah.
Okay, quite interesting. You were talking about soft facts as well. Sorry,
Skills.
soft skills. Yeah.
The phrase people use.
Do you think that is a natural talent, or is that something that you can learn?
I absolutely think it's something one can learn. I've had people comment on who I'm being, and they haven't believed me when I've thought that wasn't always like that. So I think it is something one can learn, but there's usually something to discover and let go of, rather than learning a skill. It's about understanding what's going on internally, which gets in the way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, the reason why I asked that question is we have lots of lenders that come and visit us in
Yeah.
the office, and we were discussing with them yesterday what sort of the main skill sets that they have, and they said it's the ability to go into any room and be able to get other people talking about themselves, which is pretty much. Well, I think I didn't realise that, but to a degree, I think we do that as well
Yeah.
as brokers,
Yeah.
where you can speak to someone, find out an awful lot about them, they walk away, know nothing about you, and then tell everyone what a great person you are,
Yeah.
which appeals to their egotistical nature, which we all have as well.
Absolutely. And by the way, I think some people are more automatically blessed being able to do that. Sounds like you guys are.
Oh, we can talk for England.
Sounds
do.
good. Sounds good.
Especially Martin.
But I absolutely believe people can learn
See,
that.
when you're dealing with human beings, it's much more the show not tell approach, as in get them talking first rather than you tell them what they should be saying,
Absolutely.
or the direction of the meeting. It's not up to us.
Yeah.
It's up to the other person on the other side of the table.
Absolutely, yes.
And you have to be able to open that person up, especially in our line of work and probably your line of work as well, is when you might have vulnerable individuals, delicate conversations, not always pleasant conversations,
Yes.
and people get very introvert over those matters. So it's a skill set that we probably realise we've got it more than we
Don't
know.
realise, yeah.
I mean, I always find becoming aware of what skills do have is useful, because then I'm able to, one, take ownership of them, but also I'm able to give them away to other people. But it sounds good.
What would you consider your biggest success in coaching a person or a company? What would you kind of always draw back on?
Various ones. I mentioned earlier to Joanna about working in an NHS trust, and my clients having a team leader taking a grievance against them, withdrawing that grievance halfway through and asking my client for support. And when you get things like that, that's always incredibly gratifying, because when you get people talking where there's been a chasm before. So, I mean, that one always comes to mind.
Yeah.
Another one, in another trust I went in, and I was supposed to be coaching someone to set up a team. It was all the trainers in-house, and he was just swamped work-wise. And at some point I said, do you want me to do the work and set it up? And we'll have a conversation twice a week or something, so that you can be getting a sense of what's happening. It won't be you getting coached live. Anyway, I got in touch with everyone, and at the first meeting, everyone who was meant to be there was there. And afterwards he turned around and he said, how did you do that? And I said, well, I mean, it took something, but I was able to work with him because it was so off the radar for him, that being able to happen. Now, that wasn't me specifically coaching him to do it, but it provided something else being possible, that he was just totally resigned about that ever being possible. So numerous stories like that.
And who coaches the coaches?
Yeah.
Various people. I've got, at the moment, there's a group of 7 of us who meet every Friday morning at 7. And we talk about all kinds of things, but we'll bring our issues. So this is what I'm stuck with, this one. And then we're not all coaches, but we've got a background in that kind of methodology. I'm in a program ongoingly where I get coaching, the rug gets pulled out from underneath my feet. I have a daily buddy who we message during the week, but we talk once a week. And there are times when she'll go to me, I've got something to ask you about that. God, not one of those again. Okay. Because it takes me stepping beyond my discomfort. I think Joanna was talking about earlier, the people who, I know it already. It's part of my default. And I've got a very nice, thank you for letting me know that. I've been there already. And it's like, allows me not to be vulnerable, allows me not to discover. So I have to step beyond that.
Were you always a coach, or was there a career path that led you into it? Or was there an epiphany one day when you woke up?
Very briefly, I started out in catering as a chef or waiter, barman, and then chef. I was about 24 and I participated in a self-development course. A friend of mine said, "You've got to come and do this." And after some time I went, okay. And I had no idea what I'd just done, but I continued to participate in their work. I worked for the company for 2.5 years, ran the customer service department for the UK, trained about 50 people in the work of the department, and then fell into the city, working predominantly back office work, but was able to bring some of those skills to bear as well. And then I got let go from a contract. And my wife said, this is nearly 25 years ago, my wife said, why don't you see if you can make a go of it? Take a couple of years, see if you can make a go of it in this area. You've been talking about it for long enough. And the short thing is, nearly 25 years later, I'm still seeing if I can make a go of it. So,
but fake it till you make it.
Absolutely. but along the way, I've had various training. Came out with a postgrad diploma in personal and organisational development, opened up my eyes to a lot of other methodologies. I'm not trained in NLP, but I've done an NLP weekend. I've done various things which have added to my toolbox as such.